Welcome to Faith on the Front Line. Faith on the Front Line is a podcast series focused on providing insight into the real life stories faced by everyday people and the ways in which their faith helped them to overcome the life hurdles that they faced. In this series, we'll be talking about a host of subjects. These will range from coping with debt and the rising cost of living crisis, parenting young people in particular, given societal pressures, through to having an open and honest conversation about mental health or even dealing with death and loss. This 6-part series will talk about real life personal experiences with real life women who will share how their faith helped them through the battles. Our mission here at Faith on the Front Line is to share some of the personal stories of how others have overcome real challenges that many people still face today. And by having these conversations, we hope that you too can find faith in your battles. My name is Ola Rugbu. I'm a mother, a businesswoman, a mentor, and I've been through many of my own battles, from facing my own mortality, having successfully gone through a treatment for cancer, through to going through a divorce and bringing up teenage children as a single parent. And I'm your host for Faith on the Front Line. In this episode, we're going to be talking about divorce. I went through a divorce myself, which resulted in me finding myself single with 2 teenage children. It was a tough time. Besides the practical elements relating to the costs that I now had to incur as a single mother, there was a whole host of other factors that I also had to take into consideration. So emotional factors that I suddenly found myself facing. So fear, confusion, panic about how I was going to cope. But I did. And my faith helped me through one of the darkest periods of my life. Divorce is becoming more acceptable within many societies, but there are real stories behind the often quoted statistics. So today, I'm pleased to welcome Denise May. She's known as the Happy Garden Girl. Denise is a retired program developer, that is computer programmer to you and me, and also ran a pub for 13 years. She loves gardening, not to control nature, but to be closer to God in his creation. She also enjoys reading and crochet, and most of all, walking her dog. And Denise loves serving at church. So welcome, Denise. Thank you. Before we start, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, I'm now getting on a bit. I'm 70, but I try and pretend I'm still only 35, as we all do. Since my divorce, I've been on my own now for 20 years. I was not fortunate enough to have children, but my ex-husband did have children from his first marriage. And despite the difficulties when we first split up, I'm still very much in touch with them, love them dearly. And I have a lovely big family in terms of brother, sister, nieces, nephews, great nieces, nephews, loads of cousins. And so I've been very fortunate in that sense. And lots of friends because of the time in the pub, of course.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Denise. So it sounds like you've been incredibly busy and you've got a great network of people around you. Great. Well, Denise, it was really interesting when I was reading some information about yourself, and you quoted Jamie Oliver, which I thought was really interesting, where he said, "To serve people and make their day a little better is one of life's gifts." That was a really interesting quotation. Can you tell us a little bit about why this quote resonates with you?
Well, I think actually since the passing of our wonderful Queen, where she was the absolute epitome of somebody who spends their life serving other people. And I think when you see the happiness on her face through her service, and for me, I've certainly found that doing things for other people actually improves your own sense of well-being. It takes your mind off your own problems. It helps you put things in perspective a little bit to see other people's needs. And I think it's just a wonderful thing to be able to work together with other people, to be a united front rather than just worrying about our own little problems and sticking to ourselves.
Yeah, I really love that, Denise. And it's great, you refer to the fact that, it's great to serve other people. And it also helps from a personal well-being perspective as well. And, I often hear, a lot of people now talking about, not just about what's in it for them, but also how they can help others and make an impact in the world that we're living. So I really love that. And I really love the way that you've applied that to your life. Thank you for that. So we're going to talk about your divorce. So can you just talk us through the situation leading up to your divorce, and did you see it coming?
Yes, I did. I had been deliriously happily married. I just loved every moment that I was with my ex-husband. He was always making me laugh. But I did see it coming, because we had regular contact with the other woman involved, who was clearly going out of her way to attract his attention. And eventually even other friends of mine had noticed it, because I thought, well, maybe it's just me thinking this and I'm just being jealous, and perhaps it's, there's nothing happening. But then other people started saying to me, you really want to watch her, she's flaunting herself a bit. So yes, it was probably about 18 months that I could see it coming, but I kept hoping that we would be able to get through that issue, because I think everybody from time to time is going to be tempted by something.
Yeah.
No matter how much you want to diet, you're still tempted by chocolate.
Yes.
And it's just whether or not you can resist it that makes the difference. Sadly, he couldn't. I would have still been prepared to take him back, but in the end, it didn't work out, because he felt he just couldn't ever resist the temptations.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's very, very difficult. So in your particular situation, you did try and you did fight for the marriage, but I would imagine that you had to make the decision to let him go. So perhaps you could just talk us through that.
Well, in actual fact, eventually he said that, I don't think this is going to work. So there was really nothing I could do apart from just hope that in that intervening time something would happen that would change his mind, which it didn't. So it was probably quite a few weeks of waiting to know if he was leaving or not. And then eventually one morning he just said, I won't be here when you come back tonight.
Right. Okay. And how long, if you don't mind saying, how long did that did that situation last for, in terms of when you found out through to him finally deciding to move out?
From when he said he would be leaving until he did was probably something like about 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But the start of it, from the start of it, it had been 18 months.
Right. Yeah. So that's quite a long time to be going through a really difficult situation of uncertainty. And I can definitely identify with that. So thank you for that, Denise. So I'm just really interested, just in terms of when we talk about the divorce, it's very sort of practical. There are the practical elements, but there's also, the emotional component. So when you think about it, grief comes in many guises. So, one especially painful type of grief is losing a relationship with someone who's still alive, and this kind of loss comes through divorce, or through a separation, or the end of a relationship, amongst other things. Could you tell us a little bit about the emotions that you went through leading up to and following your divorce? So was it a whirlwind of emotions, or was it you go through the cycle of the shock, the not feeling anything, through to anger? So can you just talk us a little bit through your emotions?
Yeah, so it is amazing the number of different emotions you have to go through. And actually that weekend when he left, I lost about 1 stone in weight over that weekend, just from the stress of it, I suppose. I don't think I ever felt angry towards him and didn't ever want to cause him any harm, because I suppose I still loved him. And so why would you ever want to hurt somebody you loved necessarily? I did feel anger and resentment towards the other woman, obviously, because she had gone out of her way to attract his attention. And there was an interesting time when I was driving home from work and I saw her walking down the road, and actually for about 2 seconds wondered if I could get away with driving into her.
Yeah.
And then realized this is not a healthy way to think, and I needed to think about this and address it and get some help. And the help I chose to go to was God. I decided to pick up the Bible again and start reading it again and get some help in that sense.
And that's a real emotion. So I guess, some people, feel, in terms of, their emotions, they try and suppress those, but those emotions are really real. And it's really interesting that you talked about the fact that as you were going through those emotions, you then lent on God. So it would be really interesting just to unpick your faith and how your faith helps you to get through the situation that you're in relating to the divorce and after your divorce.
Right. So I had always considered myself a Christian, although not really a practicing Christian. I loved reading the Bible. I would listen to songs of praise or watch songs of praise on a Sunday night. Didn't generally go to church. And I probably didn't really live my life in a proper Christian way. So it was one of those things where I wanted to be a Christian, but I wasn't actually really. My brother had been a Christian for many years and was praying for me through all of this time, which I believe helped. A friend of mine who I was at college with started sending me devotionals to read through on a daily basis, which also helped. But the main thing is, just reading the Gospels, reading about the teaching of Jesus. And no matter what happened to him, which was far worse than anything that happened to me, actually, he just constantly showed love and forgiveness. The only time he got angry was when the temple was being desecrated by the moneylenders. He didn't get angry with anybody who treated him badly. And so this sort of changed my way of thinking. And even in terms of the other woman, after having been reading the Gospels for several weeks, I could meet her and be perfectly friendly and chat to her, which she apparently found very disconcerting and upsetting because it wasn't what she expected. And so that in itself helped strengthen me as well, to think, well, this has to be the right thing to do. It has to be right to love and to forgive no matter what somebody does. Because through that, I felt calmer. The whole situation was calmer. And it gave me that opportunity then to look forward to a new life, to not be constantly living in the past, thinking about what had been done to me that was wrong and how awful it was and how dreadful my life had become, but to make me think of hope and a future. So really just reading the Gospels and reading the message of Jesus, the love and forgiveness that he showed throughout his whole life and all the awful things that happened to him, really right from the birth. When you think of his mother being a single teenage woman, and it can't have been easy for her, even though she knew she'd done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sure all through his life, he was considered by other people to be an illegitimate child.
Yes, of course. And that's a really good and practical way of looking at things. So again, in terms of, the initial emotion where you felt that anger, when you saw your ex-husband's previous partner, through to, the transformation, as you say, reading the gospel, was that several weeks and then that's when the transformation happened? Or can you just
No,
talk?
I would say years.
Okay, yeah.
It took me a long while. It starts straight away, but as with any journey, it's a process, and I don't think it's something that ever stops. So I'm still constantly, with everything, having to pick myself up from time to time and think, no, this isn't the right way to be thinking. Just remember what Jesus said, because it's very easy to slip back into old ways of, and actually natural ways for human beings, it seems, to have jealousy and to want revenge and all that kind of thing. But it really isn't helpful. It doesn't help anybody. It just destroys you personally. It doesn't change situations at all.
Yeah.
Nothing can. You have to live through it and come out of it. And the only way is to forgive and move on.
Thank you for that, Denise. And you talk about forgiving and moving on, so that's quite a practical thing that you did in order to, as you say, move on. Were there any other practical steps that you took in order to, as you say, not just feel the emotions that you had previously, but now you felt that you could forgive, now you felt that you could move on? But were there any other practical things that you did on a sort of day-to-day basis that you took to try and help you?
Well, I certainly continued and still do continue with daily devotionals, because I think to ground yourself in God's word every day is the only way of not going off at a tangent and doing things wrong. And I think also that there has to be an element of trying to deliberately brainwash yourself in a way. And this is where God's word does help you, because it's that constant reminder of what you must tell yourself, that it's pointless to feel that bitterness. It really isn't going to help anything. And there is so much value in feeling love. So it is a day-to-day thing. And I think even when you get over the divorce, there are other situations that crop up in your life, and you have to keep reapplying this same process of listen to what God tells you, read the Bible. If there's something bad going on in your life, read the Bible and see what God speaks into that situation. And it might be a passage that you had thought had nothing to do with your life at all. It might be a passage you've read 10 times before in the past and it meant nothing. But sometimes he will lead you to the words that actually will speak into your heart at that moment. Yeah. And they get a whole new life into them. I think also it does help. It helped in terms of my faith to then find a church where I could feel comfortable and happy. And I was very lucky in that sense that somebody I worked with just happened to invite me to the church that she had just found. And I went along, and the minute I walked through the door, it was like being suddenly wrapped in a cozy blanket. Just so much love in the air, and clearly a place where there were people of great faith. And so I felt welcomed straight away and carried on going. And that has helped hugely to have other Christians supporting me, because to sit and read the Bible on your own, well, that's better than not reading it at all. Yeah. But to be in a community where other people are encouraging you, they're there for you when things go wrong, sending little verses that they've had come to them that they think are meant for you, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that, Denise, the fact that you talked about community, because one of the questions in my mind was, did you go through this all by yourself? But having that community around you shows that, tapping into God and building a relationship is really important, but having people to share that journey and support you is also great as well. And that leads really nicely onto the other area that I wanted to unpack with you, which is, what kind of support you access to help you either physically or emotionally, both leading up to and during your divorce.
Well, yeah, so the church is a huge help and an ongoing help. I think the longer you are in a church community, the more you appreciate the friends that you have there, the support that they constantly give you. It's just amazing. I am fortunate to have a lot of friends as well from the time in the pub, of course, and working in lots of different areas around here. So the other thing I did was to, you might have seen the film about the yes man who says yes to everything. And I sort of took that attitude. If somebody invited me out, I would say, oh, yes, before I'd even checked my diary, and I would make it work. Yeah. Even if I was double booked, I would go from one thing to another. Yeah. Because it's very easy on your own to stay at home and lick your wounds. And before you know it, all the people who were inviting you out have got fed up with inviting you out, and they just drift away. So I think you also have to be proactive in making sure you keep the friends around you that you have, and making sure that they don't just drift away from you. So it can get quite tiring going to a lot of events, and it's not very pleasant at first. You go along on your own, and you feel as if everybody's going to be looking at you because you're on your own, and you feel a bit of an idiot, a bit of a lemon, which is something when you're with a partner. You might go to a party and you might not speak to each other all night. You're talking to different people, you're mixing, but you know they're in the room, and everybody else knows that your partner's in the room. But you go on your own, and it's quite a different feeling. And so I would say yes to these things, expecting to not enjoy most of the evenings or days. And so I would always pray before I went and ask for God's strength to get me through that event without either bursting into tears or running out the door before it had come to the end. And eventually you do start to relax and enjoy. And sometimes, I could almost feel his presence saying, just stick with it, just stick with it. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be strong. I'm holding you.
I love that, Denise. That is so beautiful. So I would be interested to understand, during the first stages, when you first started going out, I love the saying yes to everything. That is a great strategy. So during the initial going out, where you felt a little bit overwhelmed and not very comfortable, how did you get, you talked about what you did to get over it, but while you were in those situations, what did you do specifically to kind of start conversing with other people so that you felt a little bit more comfortable in the early days when it wasn't quite so comfortable?
Gosh, I'm not sure I can really remember. Maybe there's an element of not wanting to remember, I suspect, because it brings up emotions you don't really want to feel again. I probably talked a lot of drivel. I probably sat quietly a lot of the time as well, and didn't necessarily actually join in such a lot. I certainly came home and would just be crying for about an hour afterwards because the whole experience was so difficult. But it's surprising. It's a little bit like public speaking. It's awful the first time you do it, but the more you stand up and do it, the more you relax into it and almost start to enjoy it. So it's really hard to say. It's just one of those things you sort of have to stick with it and hope that you have talkative friends who are so busy chatting to you, they don't notice you're not responding.
Yeah, I love that, Denise. Just stick at it, which is a really great message. Really, really love that. Thank you. So I just remember, so just going back to a scenario relating to my divorce. I remember going through some real challenges through my divorce, and I distinctly remember some people saying, "Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Just get out and enjoy yourself." But they meant well. But at the time, that was not what I needed to hear. I was hurting. I was scared. I was struggling emotionally. Looking back now, was there any advice that you were given that now when you think about it was not that helpful at all?
No, I think you're right. People do seem to think, and it's the same, I'm sure, when a partner has died, people think that after 6 months you should have pulled yourself together and moved on. And they have no idea just how empty your life is. So yes, the people saying, "Oh, just get on with it, you'll be fine," is not at all helpful. You're not fine, and you won't be fine until you're ready. For some people, that might be 6 months. For some people, it might be 6 years. It's something you just have to work at yourself. I think probably quite a lot of things people say are not helpful at a time like that. And the important thing is not to think to yourself, well, these are people who aren't trying to help me, so I don't want to know them anymore. It again, you just have to think they haven't experienced this before, so you just have to forgive that they're saying something a little bit insensitive and privately ignore them. Because if they don't understand, then telling them won't help. Some things you only know through experience.
Absolutely. That's a really, really good way of looking at it. So Denise, have you healed following your divorce?
That's difficult in terms of saying healed. It's an ongoing process. I think with everything in life, you learn as you go along and you never stop learning. But I think sometimes there are times when I can think about my ex-husband, and I know I loved him in the beginning, and I still love the man that I married, because that is what makes that whole marriage valid. We loved each other at the time, but also in that time that we've been apart, I've changed and he has changed. We've both grown separately in different ways. We've had different experiences. And that man that I loved and married hasn't grown with me. He's grown ever more away from me. So he is no longer the man that I married and loved. And so I have to accept that it's almost as if he has died, because the man that I loved and will always love, because that's only right, that's why I married him, he's never going to come back. It's as if he's dead. And the new man that is there is somebody that I can get on with, I can be friends with, I can be happy to meet up with, but he's not the man that I loved anymore. He's a different man. He's somebody new. He's a different personality. And so I think this realization that he is no longer around in that sense as the man that I married and loved has helped me to see that I'm not, I may not be over him in the sense of I will always love that man, but I'm over him in the sense that that man is no longer there to love.
That's such a powerful statement, Denise, and a powerful realization. And just because you are separated from somebody doesn't mean that you know, and I would imagine that there'll be some women who'd be beating themselves up thinking, why did I marry this person? But actually there was something about that person that they fell in love with in the first place that caused them to love them. And just acknowledging that and accepting that, and accepting that actually now that you're separated, this person is very different, is okay. And it's okay having those feelings and reaching that sort of realization and acceptance. So I think that's a really powerful realization. I think it will really talk to somebody out there, whether they be Christian or not Christian, who will be going through a divorce, you know, and I'm sure that they are going through this right now. So thank you for sharing, Denise. That's really, really powerful. So that brings me to my final question. So what advice would you give to somebody going through a divorce right now?
Keep as many of the friends that you've got as you can. So go out with them and keep in touch with them. Ring them up for a chat. Don't necessarily ring them up and pour out all your problems. They've got their own problems as well, and they will get bored if you keep crying on their shoulders. Also decide which friends are maybe not helpful to you for moving on, because the different friends have different effects on your life, and some friends are for certain seasons and not for others. And it may be that there are some people who might lead you along a wrong path perhaps, or who don't actually really give you the kind of support or the kind of distraction maybe that you need. So don't be afraid to decide that person is no longer somebody who is good for me. Make that decision, and so drop some, make other new friends, make friends who were not joint friends. So I was fortunate in having a dog, and met a whole bunch of people while I was walking the dog who had never met my ex-husband, so they knew nothing other than me on my own, and accepted me as me on my own. I didn't need to talk to them about my past life, so it was something fresh and new. And I think sometimes keeping some of your old friends, but making some new friends, joining a club to do something different and to meet new people, different people. Again, I was fortunate that I stayed working for the same company, but the nature of my job altered slightly. So I was traveling more and meeting a lot more people. And that takes your mind off yourself. So that's really good. Mostly keep busy. Don't sit at home alone licking your wounds, because it really doesn't help at all. It just drags you down and down. But also be very careful that you don't go along a wrong path and start doing things that really are not in your nature and not good for you. Certainly known lots of people who suddenly started dating lots of different people, and that doesn't help necessarily. So be careful about the future relationships, though. Decide which ones you want to keep, which ones you don't need to keep. Make some new friendships, but don't go silly.
Yeah,
and keep busy.
Yeah, I that's really, really good advice, Denise. So, have the right people around you. Be sensible about the people that, that you bring into your life. There are going to be some great ones for now, and there are going to be others that actually are probably not right for you just now. And I love that. Be sensible about the relationships that you have, and get out. So thank you so much for that. That's been really, really insightful and really good conversation. I know that certainly in terms of, the conversation that we've had today, it's going to touch somebody. And somebody right now is going through, real difficulties, going through a divorce right now. And your story is going to really help them. So thank you so much for sharing that. And what I would also like to say to our listeners as well is, remember that during this time, you don't have to go through this alone. And thank you for listening to Faith on the Frontline. Thank you to Happy Garden Girl, the wonderful Denise May. The soundtrack is by Jemi Nwadike. It's called Our God is Good. You can find her music on Spotify, YouTube, and other digital channels. If you would like to access resources on any of the themes discussed during this podcast series, go to our website, which is www.faithotfl.com. That's www.faithotfl.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us on our next podcast.